Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Potato Lisk, the Potato Overmind, and I am here with Zappy,
Here.
Fonzie,
Eight.
Don Crotch, Don Crotch.
Not going to answer that.
I don't think he wants to encourage this behavior.
We can only keep a straight
as
face.
MVP
So.
Don Croft, the most awesome forum writer in North America.
Don Craft. Okay, Don Craft.
Close enough.
Oh, that troll.
What about Dan Croft? Is Dan Croft still in existence?
I think we got him
See,
banned.
this happens like in every thread. Someone misspells my name and it just gets derailed for about 5 quotes.
Okay, Dancraft, please, alright?
We have Panera the Ant-Man back.
Yes, and you know what? I know sweet bugger all about physics. Yeah, so this...
I know anything about physics and or biology.
Yeah, no, that's, so we'll see where this goes. I'll probably end up looking like an idiot for the first time ever, so...
It's okay, I'm pretty sure I just did that, so...
Don't worry, I already did that by calling Don Craft Don Crotch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Potato List just got the most thumbs downs they'll ever get.
Yeah, exactly.
No, the people will thumbs that shit up.
I don't know, I think more people support Don Croft than support you.
I would,
Yeah.
namely
I am the
Blizzard,
Potato
but-
Overmind.
Yeah, Lizard.
I have had some pretty amazing intros for the past few ones.
Okay, so, topic today.
Warptech.
Warp Tech.
Yep.
You must
That's
construct
Warpgate.
additional pylons.
Yes.
The psionic matrix. One of
Fun
the
stuff.
Protoss' chief advantage on the battlefield in the StarCraft universe.
All you who hate those 4 gates and 6 gates and 10 gates, well, that's what we're going at.
Oh, not just that. You can't forget the cannon
yeah.
rushes, the
Oh, yeah.
manor nexuses, or nexi, or nexus, depending on which route you go by.
Rivers
They're
in
really not Manor
Nexus
Nexi in
Rush.
Heart of the Swarm, though.
River
I mean,
used
in
to
Heart of
be-
the Swarm, they're really dangerous.
In twos, River used to, Wings of Liberty, River would occasionally run in and plant a Nexus right beside their command center or Nexus, and I swear, for whatever reason, every single time it would retard magnet, and all its boats would get pulled, and it would start attacking it as if there was some inherent threat, and then, as soon as it was dead, she'd just cancel it and be like, good job.
Yo, dog, I'm gonna mine your minerals.
Alright, so we're going to be talking about Warp Tech in general. Specifically, we want to hit up Warpgate, you know, all those little zealots popping up all over the place. So does anyone have any opening thoughts for this?
In the field of physics, so far, is there any sign that teleportation and warping things from point A to point B is at all possible?
Quantum
Not without
physics.
turning them into plasma, not that I know of.
Yeah.
And
Entanglement is, so far, I think, probably the closest. There's also, I mean, that's not what I would say this is. I would say this is more of a gravitational warp, where you're actually bending space-time so that 2 points are the same point. But I'm sure I'll discuss that in greater detail
Can you
soon
actually
enough.
do me a favor, Zappy? I was having this
Yep.
discussion earlier with Don Croft.
Don Crotch.
Yes.
That guy.
Don, okay.
just call me Don.
Shut up, Meg.
Okay,
It's
Don
causing
Crotch.
You realize now that we have to call you Dan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you say, Don Crotch?
I blame this all on Potato Lick. I really do.
Okay. So I
I'm
was having this
Potato
conversation
Undermine.
with Don
And
earlier
Overmind.
about your previous video for Mechanics of StarCraft, where you were talking about in particular, we were talking a little bit about the gravitational hypothesis that you've put forward about how Dark Templar tech works, and I was wondering if you could just do a quick run by about what gravity's impact potentially on time and space could be, just even if talking about relativity a little bit, because that's the topic that I know a lot of people have trouble with, myself included.
Okay, well, I mean, basically the idea is that you have to kind of think of time and space as one interwoven fabric, is this medium that we move through, kind of. I'm not the greatest at explaining this, but the best depiction I've seen of it is you think of like space as a big sheet, big piece of paper, big blanket, whatever. And when you have something exceptionally massive like a star or a planet, it puts a dent in the sheet so that when things go by it, they kind of like, for example, if you have a bed laid out and you put a bowling ball in the middle of the bed, if you roll something across it, and it goes too close to the bowling ball, because of the dip in the sheet, it'll bend.
Yeah.
Where it's going will actually adjust. It'll change off of its previous course, and that's kind of what I was getting at with a lot of the gravity tech, is that it bends everything around it. I don't know how.
And is
Now,
this-
when it comes
this
to
is-
that example, and when it comes to the Dark Templar and the Void, I always wonder what's under that sheet.
What a toast.
What's under that sheet?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is
That-
what I think
that's
where the
mysterious
Void comes from. Because if you think about it, if you could dip, under that sheet, you could technically pop up anywhere. Because, I mean, if you had the power to go up without dipping down into that sheet, I mean, gravity wouldn't matter and space wouldn't matter and blah, blah, blah.
Well,
Fold
Stephen
it.
Hawking has talked about wormholes a fair bit, and I think that, I mean, now correct me if wrong. It has something to do with manipulating increasing densities of gravity or something like that. And I know that density does have a humongous issue or a humongous impact, on gravity. But
We
yeah.
should bring up that all three races in StarCraft have some kind of warp tech. The Terrans can use it for travel with their larger starships, and the Zerg can too. They can create subspace tears or wormholes. We witnessed that in the cinematic after, I think it was the eighth mission in the original Zerg campaign, where they
I know what you're talking
travel
about.
to higher. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that too. But anyway, so how does this this gravity and density and weight and all that, how does this sort of work with this warp tech is where I was trying to go with this.
All right, so you remember I said earlier it makes a dip in the space-time sheet, right?
Mhm.
Well, the idea is that if you make a dip deep enough, you can dip down to the next sheet, essentially. So time kind of ceases to be linear when you get in these situations, and what you have is actually a couple of alternate realities, and it sounds very sci-fi crazy, I know, but what happens is you make you stop making a pit and you start making a dip, like a well almost, straight down into this sheet, and you drop a zealot or whatever you're warping in through that hole, and he pops up on the other sheet. And that sheet is presumably wherever you want him in on the battlefield.
So you're basically talking about manipulating. It's not wormholes per se, is it?
It kind of is.
Okay.
It's, yeah, I mean, that's probably actually the best way I could explain it right now.
And in the StarCraft universe, the matter that is capable of creating such a distortion is the Kadaran crystal. In fact, in order to bring the Overmind to manifest on Ire during the invasion, they had to capture a large Kadaran, the Zerg had to capture a large Kadaran crystal and plant it at a certain site to draw the Overmind in. Also, the pylons, the pylons that create the psionic matrix that the Protoss are able to manipulate, those are related to the Kadaran crystals, and in the center of every mothership and mothership core and Nexus, I believe there's a Kadaran crystal that they use.
Yeah.
Is there not one in the gateways as well? Before
Yeah,
you
what about the warp gates?
before you open them into warp gates, is that not a crystal?
No, that is through the pylon power. The pylon is the crystal.
No, I mean like when you first have a gateway, not a warp gate, but a gateway.
It kind of floats in the middle of the structure. You can kind of see it turning around.
Yeah.
And then
Yes,
gateway
that's the catalyst. Yes, that's a little different, but
okay,
But similar in nature to these.
yes, it
Kadaran
is.
crystals.
It's crystallic technology. The Protoss are very into that, as many supposedly advanced sci-fi races are. It's like the next thing.
Actually, the next thing I was just reading last night, was it? They've basically they figured out how to basically make a liquid metal within a plastic almost, so that you can take a wire and stretch it like 6 times the length without ruining any of the conductive materials. That's the next thing. I read that just yesterday.
I mean, I think the next thing beyond that, even I could.
I meant
be so
in a
bold as to
sci-fi
say is
sense.
entanglement.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say entanglement. It's this strange property of quantum particles where if you can get two particles to entangle themselves, hence entanglement, any property you see one exhibit, or not any property. Actually, it might be. Okay, I don't know off the top of my head. But if you have one of the particles exhibiting, say, upspin, it's not really important what that is. Just know that it's a property. The other one will exhibit downspin instantaneously, no matter what you do. And what that is, this is a real thing. Actually, I was just talking to my friend's dad today about an experiment at MIT they were doing with this. And it's instantaneous. It's faster than the speed of light. So I've got particle A, say in Michigan, where I am right now. I could have particle B in Canada, all the way by Panera.
Well, that is Canada.
Shut the up.
If I suddenly make particle A spin up, particle B will instantly, faster than the speed of light, be spinning down. And that's kind of the next step, and I think that's where these crystals come in. I would argue that these crystals, I seem to remember somewhere they have to be psionically attuned. Don Croft, I'm sure you could correct me on this.
They do have to be.
We
And
actually
they are often found at sites that were visited by the Xel'Naga. Surprise, surprise.
We actually discussed, just to catch you guys up, because I know the episode hasn't been posted, we discussed the biological ramifications of what psionics is. Sort of came to the conclusion that it's like a chemically based electrosensory communication organ that has been repurposed and enhanced. So I guess you could almost use that with these crystals. But I was wondering, so you mentioned that when one has, say, a top spin, the one that's entangled will have a bottom spin, right?
Yeah, its partner particle will exhibit the opposite behavior.
I'm sorry, when you say a spin, what is spinning? Like, I'm trying to visualize.
You've got a little particle. It's literally just a spin, like it's spinning in circles, like it's in the middle of a merry-go-round.
So this is a quantum?
It's a quantum state. So,
I mean, is this an atom? Is this a electron?
Okay.
What is?
Now, I've seen it. Right, I've heard of it being done with. Yeah, it's a potato. I've heard of it being done with carbon atoms. That's what I was talking about today. But that's the biggest I've ever heard of it being referenced. That's why I said kind of these crystals would be the next step. Is that once you can take it beyond the microscopic into the macroscopic, that is where the true applications of this would come out.
Yeah, and I was just what I wanted to say before. Just sorry to interrupt you. Where I was going with my question was because it seems to me that you could almost be sort of uploading the individual, like turning him into this warp matrix or whatever, at the exact same time that he's downloading into a part of the field, right? So, like for example, he could be uploading it on Ire and then like warping in, say, on Tarsonis simultaneously, right?
Yep, I mean, and that's kind of the idea. If it's done through entanglement, what you would essentially have is you'd have these collection of particles that are entangled with particles presumably in and around the pylon. I would say that they would come in with the pylon because you still have to get the particles there by some other means. You can't, teleport in the particles. But once you're there, you can you have the particles that come in around the pylon, which would be the power field, right? Because in power field, you've got these transfer particles of all the different forces interacting there. And these particles are entangled with some particles back on Shakuras, or Ire, depending on which game you're playing. And you would say, just for example, a zealot needs to be so many, like a billion particles all spinning down in a certain formation. You would make that formation of particles back on Shakuras, and you would spin all those particles up, which would spin all the particles on Tarsonis, for example, down. And then you would get this zealot.
Okay, so here's another question. When you put a probe, like let's say, you remember the Zergicology episode where we talked about taking a drone all the way through its motions or whatever. Let's say you're like a little probe that's been dumped off on Shakuras. You're the first probe. You go to warp in a nexus. How does that work with what you're saying? Because
presumably,
probes are manufacturing centers of microbeacons. They're microscopic catalysts that begin the reaction that opens up the subspace warp, whatever it is. Maybe subspace, wrong word, but it opens it up. They manufacture these microbeacons and they plant them.
Is it like a mini singularity that they start?
I believe so, yeah. I think that's exactly what it is.
And then it sort of reaches critical mass with density, and then whatever the gravity, garbage, magic alchemy, whatever you want to call it. I don't know this stuff. But that's when presumably the Nexus warps in after it reaches critical mass.
Well, basically what we've got here is two different theories for how this hypotheses, you're welcome, of how this could work. The one is the singularity warp method, which I would lean towards just because it's called a Warpgate, where you have this incredibly dense singularity. The probe would come down and drop that off, and it would bend space-time. It would make that well that I was talking about before, and you would drop the Nexus through the well, and it would come out the other side. And then there's the other method with the entanglement, which I'm not so sure, but it could be. But again, I don't know for sure on this one, where the probe would bring in essentially a starter culture of entangled particles, and you would use those particles to get yourself more entangled particles over to wherever you are.
But wait, but both are still coming from Ire, right?
Essentially.
No,
well,
no.
So wouldn't
They
Ire
would
run out
have
of
been,
Nexide?
yeah, they would have been from Ire.
And then presumably there's manufacturing facilities like on Shakuras too, because these things aren't being made out of nowhere, right? So they're making the Nexus.
Yeah, Ire's kind of out of commission.
Yeah, we should get away from calling it Ire. We have to talk about Shakuras now because Ire got over by the Zerg.
Yeah. So
either way, one of these planets is running out of Nexi.
Yeah.
Well, I want to point something out here real quick, and that's that it could be a combination of the two. You could be using entangled particles to create the singularity at whatever point so that you could teleport in larger objects and more entangled particles. It doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of total separation. In fact, I think a combination of these ideas would work best.
Actually, there is a different animation from warping in a zealot, say, warping him in with warp tech. And then it's visually different than, say, planting a pylon and you get that sort of big circular looking thing. Is it possible that maybe when you're warping in like a building, say, or like say you're warping in a Colossus even, it's not necessarily like it's not doing that sort of quantum entanglement. Maybe there's some sort of singularity being used or something like that, like you were discussing where you're sort of puncturing that fabric?
Yeah, I mean the buildings themselves all look very, very much so singularity based transportation that rather than entanglement. But when the units are warping in, your zealots, your stalkers, your Templar, they all to me it looks more like an entanglement process. But when you look at the Warpgate looks like it has a huge singularity, which is I believe I said in the previous mechanics episode. Warpgate is a kind of grand union of the Dark Templar and High Templar technologies, where you've got this electromagnetic, which would be the entanglement theory, colliding with the gravitic technology of the Dark Templar to create these warps.
Fonzie, what do you think?
Well, how I always thought it, the buildings they generally rip them through at once. That's why it takes so long for them to form, is they're essentially just pulling the entire building together at once. Whereas a unit, and why it has that different form, is they essentially disassemble the Zealot or the Stalker and then reform it in the field on the other planet.
You know, that brings up an excellent point. The fact that Warpgate units, once they are coming from a Warpgate, are front-loaded production rather than back-loaded. I mean, where
you spend the money, you get the unit, and then you have the cooldown.
Then you have the cooldown, right? Whereas everything else in the entire game, including the other Protoss units and buildings, have a back-loaded build time.
Well, presumably, the Zealot already exists, so they've invested in armor training, blah, 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 and it's just a matter of...
presumably the carriers exist as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. See, when you're bringing a Zealot through a gateway, it takes time to pull it through, just like you're bringing a building through. But when they use Warpgate, it's like it just instantly goes right through the psionic power field and forms, and then it has to cool down and recharge.
And here's another...
That might be...
Now that they've sort of pierced that sort of micro versus macro.
Guys, I've got this.
What?
Okay.
He's got
it.
it.
So back on their old planet of where the Zealot is coming from, it's kind of like a water slide at a water park. He goes up, he jumps into it, and then someone's waiting there and saying, wait, before you can go, you have to wait till he's fully over there and until it's safe. Everyone else is out of the way so you don't run your ass into someone's face.
So the water slide.
And another zealot comes in and does the same thing, and then you have multiple warp gates for doing the same thing at the same time.
But High Templar are line hogs, so they take
Yes.
forever to get out of the pool. Because they
that's
just kind of
because
float
they have-
around there looking cute.
They're
They're kind of fat and they get stuck on the slide
Well,
every now and
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
They're not
like
they're very
fat.
self-conscious.
They're elegant. And
They are
the
they don't want to mess up their
children.
outfit.
Guys, that's because they have a little coupon. They pay $20 more to get into the water park, so that way they get to jump the line again and again and again and be a massive prick about it.
That's true.
All right, well,
Same thing for Dark
I
Temple.
want to say something a little bit more serious. And I think that might be that this sort of entanglement process of transporting in the lighter units, the smaller things, may work on a smaller scale, but the Protoss have not yet combined their two technologies to the point where they can get it to work with the larger units. And the entanglement process itself is inherently faster. You don't have to wait for something to travel through this gravitic warp. You just have to start spinning your particles and boom, he's there. I think that might be part of the reason why you end up with this. I've got instantly a High Templar, but I can't instantly smack out my carrier.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to the time, like the build times, like why a carrier would take so long to make, perhaps because it takes longer for that singularity to reach critical mass.
The carrier takes
That's
so
because this
long
carrier
to
is
build
going through a
because
small water slide.
Blizzard refuses to buff it.
Okay, well,
Don Crotch.
Oh,
Come on,
the
Don
unbuffers.
Crotch.
Dang it, Blizz! Just reduce the darn build time.
Damn it, Don Crotch.
Knockcroft,
make
if
them
they
smaller
do
because-
that, I will one base carrier rush every single match I end up as Protoss, and I will lose every single one. You realize that, right?
okay, so I've got
I
a
love the carrier far too much. If it gets buffed, I will not be able to stop myself.
Guys.
quick question,
It's because the
guys.
carrier gets stuck in a really tiny water slide, and then they have to get a bunch of zealots to go in there, push him all the way through, get the zealots to go back up to the top, and repeat the same process with another carrier because they're all too fat to realize, hey, I can't fit through this water slide. Oh, there, I'm gonna go anyways.
So
Okay,
basically,
so-
we need a bigger water slide.
So
Yes, but then building a bigger water slide will cost extra resources, which the Protoss don't really have.
fair enough. So I'd just like to take a quick poll. Who else's brain is starting to hurt from this physics talk?
Oh, mine's been that,
My
mine's been that way
IQ
since
is
the
going
beginning
up
of
by the
MoS.
second, actually. This
Oh,
is
like, okay, so I guess there's no
I mean,
real
that's-
simpler way to explain other than to maybe just recap it in a more concise way. What's going on between warping in versus true warp tech and whatnot. Zappy, could you do that?
Water slide explanation was pretty good.
Yes, it's
Yeah, the water slide.
It's what we call the short bus. The
We should just call it, guys. I've got this term. We're gonna call it potato listing.
I call it
Potato.
humor.
Yeah, that works.
the potato list warp
Warp
slide
slide. the
Warp
potato
slide.
warp
Potato
slide.
list water slide theory.
hypothesis.
Hypothesis.
Each and every one.
All right. So to sum up the idea, basically, when you have the larger warp-ins, the buildings, the carriers, the colossi, you're creating this gravitic well where you link two separate planes in space-time. Basically, you're creating a singularity that connects two separate points in space. And you send the unit through that singularity to get it to the other side. Whereas when you're warping stuff in, you are doing it through entanglement, more likely, where if you spin one particle, it'll spin the other one the opposite way. So you just spin enough particles or modify them however is necessary to get your other particles to turn into a zealot, to get you a zealot.
That was a good recap. Now let's do it without all of the physics geek speak.
Okay. Let's see. Bigger warp-ins are like, dropping a quarter down a well, and when it splashes, you get the unit. Alright? Smaller warp-ins are like turning on your flashlight, and when the light hits the wall, you get your unit.
And then there's the recharge. And that's actually, yeah. Bravo.
Where do the potatoes fit in?
The potatoes are dropped down the well.
Okay.
I actually have a question. I've always wondered, but I've never had anyone ask it to.
Alright?
Zealot's warping in, Pylon gets
Zealots.
taken out.
Zealots.
Not
Zealots,
Zealots.
sorry.
J9 has gone on a tangent about this. It's Zealots, not
Super.
Zealots. It's
Okay,
Grenadiers, not
let-
Grenaders.
Okay, carry on, Fonzie. We don't
Okay.
want to scare him off.
So the Zealot is warping in. Pylon gets taken out. What happens to him? Does he literally get ripped in half? Does he snap back to Shikuris? What?
He's
Alright, well, I'd like to think he
Trans
snaps
fail.
back to Shikuris, but I can't. I refuse to believe that he's completely unscarred by the event. Imagine you're half in one place, and not like your legs are in one place, but like every other particle of you is in one place, and then all of a sudden those particles come flying back to you. You might live still, but you're not going to be the same, I don't think.
Presumably, could they not have warp gates on either side open and just warp the same guy over and over, back and forth?
Because
Yes,
the guys have
absolutely.
I don't think it replicates him.
No, not to
Because-
replicate. I mean, just like he finishes warping in on Tarsonis and immediately like, oh, never mind, changed our mind, back to Shikuris.
A constant loop.
Just
We
repeatedly
almost went
teleport him
frickin'
back and forth.
frickin' Prestige there. I was, oh man, you seen that movie?
Nope.
The Prestige. Oh man, that's
It's been a while. Can't
all
actually
these
remember.
bobs over and over again. Oh gosh.
So
That
yeah,
solves the Protoss, army problem.
we're at about 25 minutes here, so maybe a good time for some conclusion or final thoughts, I guess.
I
think
hit myself. Anyone else have anything?
No, I'm
The
good.
conclusion is that the Terrans are very, very envious. And the only time they ever tried this was when they were under Duran's, direction back at the end of Brood War in the secret mission, and
was
they
infested,
blew
so-
up. Yeah. Well, he was double infested. It was messed up, and they blew up a lot of pylons, and it failed. And they're very jealous of the Protoss. So suck it, Terrans.
If Marines start warping in, we're gonna have issues. So I'm just.
Yeah, we're gonna drop pods. It's coming.
And this is reflected in the fact that Blizzard has found it necessary to nerf the Terran over and over to the point where, well, the win rates are close to 50-50,
Close.
Sorry, I just...
Statistics are for losers. What was that? It's Laws of StarCraft Balance or something that I wrote up a while ago.
Yeah.
Here, hang on, I'm on the forums. Zappy laws.
Okay. So anyway...
Everyone, go find his posts right now.
I'm looking.
They were made at
Actually, I wrote that.
10:58
I'm gonna
p.m.
do
12:22. That would be December 22nd. Go spam him. Get it.
Okay, and I think it's important to comment again. Tell all your friends about the series. If they're nerds, they'll like it. And if they don't, then they're not nerds and they can go back to watching MMA. That's fine.
No, you know what? I don't care what you say. Link this on Facebook.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah. Tell
Be
everybody.
like a religious person. Force it down their throats.
Exactly. Because there's no better way to do it, right? Well, let's not go
All
there.
right, well, we're not going to start a religious
Rabbit
fight in
trail.
mechanics of StarCraft.
Yeah.
We'll start that another time.
Yes. We'll save that for Reddit, please.
Yeah, we'll save that for the Potatoless Kate Zerg episode, right? When we
We'll
do
save
that
for
one.
the Potatoless Rant episode.
Yep, that one.
That's every episode that you're on.
Oh, no. This is gonna be this is gonna be a rant about Zerg, about religion, and about anything else that I want, with no interruptions.
Why not ranting about ranting? It's what you're good at.
Because that would be in-depth.
I want to remind everybody, leave questions, comments, if you want to volunteer in any capacity. Seriously, you can send one of us an email, and we'll take it into consideration. The best thought out email I've had so far ended up being on the very next show, after I read it, in fact. So that's awesome. That's great if that's all you want to contribute. If you want to be on the show, hey, we've got 2 shows now. So double the opportunity to join us.
Plenty of time to work you guys in.
Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the favorite buttons, or I will.
Ouch.
That's
And I will
harsh.
and I will say that I disapprove of you.
Yeah, I don't approve of that either. Yeah. Maybe potatoes don't have balls.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
Potatoes
point.
do.
I think they have cotton ones though. You could. I guess.
Irish potatoes do, man.
Oh, okay.
Leave it to Panera to go all microbiologist on.
Hey man, that was botany, alright? Show some respect. I failed that.
Close enough.
He failed that class. He still knows more than you ever will. How does that feel?
I don't have a screen. Challenge accepted.
You're also not a Panera. You don't know everything about everything biological.
Challenge accepted.
All right, so next episode, your challenge is to try to stump me. Everyone else, yeah, thanks for listening. I guess I'll leave Zappy to close things out since it's a show.
I don't know. Panera pretty much hit it. Make sure you guys like the movie. Make sure to comment. If you don't want to comment on YouTube, actually commenting on the forums makes it significantly easier for me to respond to you. If you want to contribute in any way, just post it. And, we'll get back to you.
StarCraft's a community, ladies and gentlemen. It's great. Be part of it.
Yep.
There you go.
Woo!